Hey everybody, welcome back to the K2N Online Paddle School. We are back here on YouTube, and this week we're talking about managing the arms leverages to maximize our power output. There are common errors in the canoe stroke and the kayak stroke that actually differ from each other, but we'll go over both of those today. The most common error with managing your arms leverages in the kayak is having your elbows too low in the stroke. So as we see paddlers that struggle to create boat speed, we see that they have very low elbows and low hands through their stroke. Even if you have leg drive and hip drive, the potential for your power output is inherently limited by the height of the elbow. Looking at this motion, if I have low elbows and I'm trying to throw a ball with the top hand, as I load up my legs, we are hindered by this leverage point here. As I go through to throw the ball, we can inherently see that this is a mighty weak position to operate from. In the seated position, a much more powerful position is bringing this elbow up to shoulder high. Now if I have a ball in this hand and I load my hips and my legs, the potential of power on this hand is much higher. I load up the top hand to this height, and as I throw the ball, the amount of power that I can create is higher. The reason that we're creating more power is because we have more space to operate from. In the seated position, we are locked into a specific height away from the water, and we need to manipulate our hands towards the water in the most effective way. By having our hands low, we limit the amount of space that we can travel downward towards the water. In reverse, if we had to push energy upward, having the bottom hand low to high now generates much more potential power because of the space. At the opposite extreme, having the arm overhead and coming down, this seems like we should have the most amount of space and power at our disposal. In the seated position though, as we go down through this position, if we start super high, we are going to complete and end the stroke before our leverages start to work with us. This paradigm starts to change as we're standing, where we can have a more extended hand overhead coming downward and using our hips and legs to change that level like on a stand-up paddleboard. In most cases in the seated position, having the elbow at about shoulder high, it can be a little lower, maybe a little higher. This gives us adequate motion of traveling downward, maximizing our body leverages and maximizing the paddle's leverages. One more time, weak paddling is having these elbows low as we're going through the stroke. Even if you have hip and leg motion, the amount of power you create is limited because of poor arm leverages. By bringing this elbow up to shoulder high each time and going through these strokes, now the amount of power that I can create with the same leg and hip rotation is much higher because of the adequate spacing that is provided by the elbow height coming up. Now looking at the top hand position with the canoe stroke, the common error we're going to see is this top arm coming up too high. Our seated position puts us into a fixed location in relation to the water with some variance coming up and down a little bit. This variance, if pushed to too many extremes, disengages the legs and forces the body to curl by rounding the back, which means that your spine is not powered by the legs. Leaning forward on the legs means that you have this adequate connection of the lower body, moving the upper body, but you can only move so far. In this position, I really can't lean any further forward without shifting my weight off my foot onto my butt and curling my back. If I keep my back straight and lean forward, unless I collapse my torso, I can't go any further forward. So now I'm operating from a range that looks something like this. So these 3 or 4 inches allow us to get a little closer to the water, which may extend our top hand position a little higher. Knowing that this position from me to the water is fixed, if my top hand is really high up, the distance that the hand travels down is going to equal the distance between my sternum and the water approximately. Knowing that I am not this high off the water as we complete this stroke, once we get to the end of the stroke, this top hand is going to be somewhere at about shoulder high. Our ability to push down on the water is maximized from about eye level as the hand travels downward. We can get more of our body weight over the paddle as the handle descends below our center of gravity. If the handle is above my center of gravity, the only way I can push down on this is with this arm and a little bit of body weight. So instead of using the majority of the body weight by operating here, having this top hand too high now forces you into an inherently weak position early into the stroke. And by the time you get some leverages, the stroke is over and you have to repeat that process. In the kneeling sprint canoe, standing on stand-up paddleboard, your ability to change your level more dramatically than leaning forward a little bit now allows this hand and its pathing to be much stronger, powered by those mechanics. This is a common issue as we look at those sports and think, oh man, the Olympic champion. In the C1 canoe, they have their arm overhead. I should mimic this in the seated position. There are two different sports. Try kneeling and going through that motion and you will find you have so much more range of motion and is powered by your hips moving through space. In the seated position, if my hips move through space, forward and down, I fall out of my seat, right? We are inherently locked into this fixed position because we are seated. This changes the mechanics of how our body moves and where our arm is most effective. Same idea as the kayak. We want this elbow about shoulder high. The hand may end up a little bit higher as we're going through the stroke. We're rotated through, but this elbow being in this position means when I grab the water, I have immediate power and response on the water. If this elbow is too high, there is a period of time as it travels down that it is not as effective as it could be. By assessing this position and putting it into ideal position immediately gives you more power at the catch. Having this arm way overhead makes the catch immediately weak and you struggle to find pressure until you are late into the stroke or exiting. Not as common of an error, but just like with the kayak, if the elbow is too low, now we don't have enough space. This elbow traveling down only goes a few inches, but I need more movement to complete the stroke. You'll see the elbow extend, the bottom arm pull, and these are all weak elbow mechanics when we want to try and engage the connection with the whole body. So having this elbow too low and going through the stroke this way is just as detrimental as having this elbow super high and not effective early into the stroke. Identify when this arm is effective, somewhere around here, maybe a little lower, maybe a little higher, where you have this range. Feel the connection with the water immediately with this top arm by maximizing your arm's leverages. So in summary, it's like Goldilocks. You don't want your elbows too low. You don't want your elbows too high and out of position. You want to find a spot that is just right. An easy way to identify where your hands and elbows are strongest is simply by doing some pressing exercises. If this elbow goes up very high, you will immediately feel an impingement here as you begin trying to push this hand in different directions. If your elbow is too low, you won't feel the engagement of your upper body, but maybe just the arm by itself. Finding this range where these elbows come up to the side maximizes your pushing ability and pushing downward ability. Don't forget to tune into The Paddle Pursuit. It is right here on YouTube for free. You can check it out on Spotify and Apple as well. And as always, if you're interested in more in-depth training information, check out the K2NOnlinePaddleSchool.com today. Invest in your technique this paddle season. Make sure that you are honing and making the strides forward with your movement and understanding of your equipment. Thank you all so much for the support, and we will see you all next week with our next quick tip video.